What about you? What's your number two?
All right, so it's really interesting. I looked into this one more deeply, and there was a great podcast released a few weeks ago by Stuart Weems that dives into the actual numbers behind this. But I don't think the average person and even most property investors are aware how much of a vested interest banks and governments have in property keeping going. So if property was to collapse, let's just say, and I'm not forecasting that at all, I don't necessarily think people realize what it would do to our banking system, right? So all the banks are very reliant on the mortgages and the asset value of property in Australia. So to think that there wouldn't be some sort of intervention or that there would be policy in place, like first home buyer schemes, like maybe the government buying 30% of your house, like we would just think that that's implausible. So I have this belief, and this is just an opinion from me, is that I don't think we can underestimate how far governments and banks will go to keep the party going. I sincerely believe that there is a real flaw put into the system by this. And I'll give you some examples. When a developer builds a new property, 30% of the cost is actually tax. So whether it's planning, whether it's cost of like land donation, whether it's stamp duty when someone buys it, whether it's land tax, like there's all these things that actually happen. GST. So when you've got an industry that is funding the government in such a big way, right, it is very plausible to think, well, if that party was to stop, just how much trouble the government would be and vice versa. Totally. So when I look at this wholeheartedly and you really investigate under the hood of how much of a vested interest occurs, I believe that ongoingly we'll keep seeing governments and banks make changes to policy to keep property doing what it's doing.
And we've seen this around the world before. Were you across like the whole China when they were just building like these ghost cities to prop up like GDP when it comes to real estate? Like this is not, maybe you're being a bit speculative here, Charlie. This is like countries do that specific thing, especially like for me to support what you're saying. Last couple of years haven't been a great couple of years for the economic growth of most countries, right? Like we printed a whole heap of money, which created a whole heap of debt. And now a lot of countries are going, well, how are we going to continue to bring in money into the country? And one of the greatest ways is more tax or more people coming in, like immigration or these other ways so that the government can earn money to help with payment of interest rates on their debt, but also to increase the economic strength, I'll say, so that, again, Australia becomes more appealing, more people want to come here, and it's like this little forever cycle. And so I concur with this completely. I think that the government, it's more than just them wanting to increase the revenue of taxes, etc. I think that this is an entire bigger game of just going, what is the best level we can push to grow the economy and bring more money into the government? And boy, is that a big lever. It's a massive lever.
Well, just lay it down further. Let's just not even look forward. Let's look back. First home buyer incentives, government grants and home builder, right? The list goes on. The equity scheme that has been there before. Like how many times has government intervened in property to keep it going? It's a heavy employer of the country. Like construction's one of the major industries that employs the country as well. To think that a government would let it fall, again, with the banking system so reliant on it as well, I just think is untenable. And Harry Triguboff, which if you haven't looked into him, he would have to be one of Australia's biggest developers. Like he's someone was interviewing him on the news and they pulled him up and they said, Harry, how do you feel about the economy? He said, very good. I have great business partners. And she said, can you tell us more? And she goes, well, governments and banks have a very vested interest in this continuing. So I feel like I'm in a great position. I was like,
love how he turns to banks and governments being his business partners. I love that mindset. But
think about it. If all the people, let's say he does a development and it's suited to first home buyers and the government's giving them first home buyer grants to buy those properties, they kind of are. If APRA is making lending policy more lenient, they kind of are.
I'd love one day to look through all of like the incentives that the government and banks sort of put together and split it out into which ones are trying to get more people who aren't in property into property, aka like your first home buyer grants and all these kind of like, if you do this, welcome to the property industry, and then versus the ones to try and like keep people in or like buy more house. Like I would love to see, because I think the strategy would become so obvious. It's like, well, you're just trying to push more people into owning property, or you're just trying to get more people to buy a bigger house or do something better or move out to rural areas so that you can just increase everything else. One day I might have to look at that, because I think you'd be pleasantly surprised. I think there would be a heavy weighting towards more people who aren't in property. How do I get them to buy property?
I will put in this point, which I perhaps should have stated earlier in the episode from here. On a long-term horizon and trend, I believe in property, but I also believe there will be some ups and downs along the way. Like there will be some volatility. And I think that for myself, the way I'm setting up my own investing journey is to be able to ride that volatility stress-free. It's be able to go, I'm playing a 20, 30-year game here. I don't need to take unnecessary risk that could potentially cause a wipeout or a challenging event. Now, interest rates could go up. They could go down. They might go up again. They might go down again. You know, a whole bunch of things could change in the world that would cause this volatility. But over what we're discussing here, these trends are really what I'm getting behind.
All right, fellow property investor, if you loved the value from this short video and wanted to know more about how you can win at property investing, check out the full episode by clicking the link on your screen or in the description right now. Alternatively, click subscribe and you'll never miss another one of these videos.